So it's my great pleasure to open this workshop on the role of science in climate change litigation. It has been co-organized by BIICL London, the British Institute for Intercomparative Law, and the Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna of Pisa. I will immediately give the floor first to the Vice Chancellor of the Scuola Sant'Anna, Professor Sabina Nuti, and then to the Director of BIICL, Spyros Maniatis, to give a welcome address. And then in this section, you will hear Francesca Capone from Scuola Sant'Anna, then Alistair Gilbert from Imperial College, me from Sant'Anna, and Christine Bakker, who is visiting scholar here at Sant'Anna and visiting fellow at BIICL. So I give the floor to Sabina Nuti, the Vice Chancellor of Sant'Anna. Thank you, Sabina, the floor is yours.
So thank you, Roberto. I'm really very pleased today to open this conference, this meeting. I think the topic is really relevant for all of us, for Scuola Sant'Anna, for Italy, for our country, for Europe, and also for England, for all the world. So why is it so important? Well, because I think it's the great challenge. How can we work with an interdisciplinary approach on this topic? And I think that the idea of Roberto to create here at Scuola Sant'Anna an interdisciplinary group has been a great idea, and is a great challenge. So for me today, it's a great pleasure to welcome you all together with Professor Spyros in this workshop on the role of science and climate change litigation. So this workshop is also part of a seasonal school. Seasonal school are these training programs that we organize at Scuola Sant'Anna that are open to talented students from all over Italy and also from other countries, and are some specific training program quite on the research topics where we think we are on the edge and where we can in a way bring our research to all the university in Italy and to all the students that are interested in these very challenging topics. The Sant'Anna School actively engaged in research and teaching related to climate change in various disciplines, including physics, economics, political science, and law. Sant'Anna School, it's a public university that creates opportunities for talented students, whatever is their background, because it's a completely paid, supported by the state. Applied science, so we are working in the field of economics, management, law, political science, agriculture science, plant biotechnology, medicine, and industrial information engineering. So all the school would like to have every day more an interdisciplinary approach. And this conference, it's a way for trying to work with this type of connection between social science and applied science to find solutions, to find new ways to approach this really relevant topic for our future, for the future of the world. So I'm very pleased that Roberto, together with other colleagues from various departments of the school, has put together these series of events centered on climate change. And this is one of the events that I think really can make the difference for our school and for our students. So I wish you all the best for your discussion today and tomorrow. I know that this meeting will go on 2 days, and I really hope that we will continue our cooperation, especially with the British Institute of International Comparative Law. I'm really very happy that this is going on, and I hope we can have some other opportunities to meet and to discuss and to work together. Thank you to all of you for being present to this very interesting conference, and I give back the floor to Roberto.
Thank you very much, Sabina. Thank you for hosting this meeting, and thank you for your very kind words. So I would like now to give the floor to Spyros Maniatis, Director of the British Institute of International and Comparative Law. Spyros, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Nuti. Thank you for the introduction. It is a great pleasure also for me to welcome you on behalf of the British Institute for International and Comparative Law to this workshop. I agree 100% with what Professor Nuti has mentioned, and there's no safe haven anymore. A couple of days ago, the underground systems both in New York and London flooded because we saw in London rain that we usually get over a couple of months. So we see the effects all over the world, not only in California, not only in Canada, all over the world. We'll see the events of what we are going through. So I'm delighted that we are co-hosting this program with University of Sant'Anna, and it is a pity that we were not able to meet you all in person in Pisa, in particular for all of us that are locked in London. I hope that at some point we will be able to meet against a more realistic environment, context, if you like. Like the Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies, BIICL is also actively engaging in research and teaching that is related to climate change. The Institute is an independent research organization. Our research projects, seminars, publications cover so many areas of public and private international law, comparative law, European law, and we also look at all these challenging questions from the perspective of the rule of law. We are at the forefront of conversations on so many contemporary issues of international comparative law. Part of our membership, part of the people that work with us, we are proud that we have so many good scholars, practitioners, judges, representatives of civil society organizations. And this guarantees that we look at these questions from a very broad perspective, and I hope equally rigorous. In the field of climate change, climate law in particular, BIICL has developed a very strong program of work over the last couple of years. This included a workshop on climate change litigation in January 2020, the publication of the book on climate change litigation global perspectives, edited by Ivano, Christine, and Jean-Pierre, that was published a few months ago. Specialist training courses on climate change, a number of webinars, including a webinar series on rising sea levels, and a very successful conference last week looking at the questions of separation of powers in the context of climate change litigation. Moving forward, we're looking really, we're looking forward to working on a range of cutting edge issues in these fields, in particular, together with the Sant'Anna School of Advanced Study. I'm very happy that we have a range of organic links between the two institutions, and I hope that this conference will be the start of a more fruitful, formal collaboration between the two organizations. Let me conclude by wishing you a great, fruitful, interdisciplinary dialogue that I hope that we will continue beyond the 2 days of the conference. I will do my best to make sure that BIICL, together with the Sant'Anna School and all the other collaborators in this project, will continue to provide a hub, a forum for reflecting on these issues. Thank you so much. Enjoy the conference.
Thank you very much, Spyros, for your introduction. It's great that we have been working together. We wouldn't be here without all the work that especially Christine put in, and Ivano, Jean-Pierre, and Liam, and all the people in at BIICL. Okay, so thank you very much for all your support and help. So I'm now going to give the floor to Francesca Capone, who is assistant professor of international law here at Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna. She will talk about the seasonal school, which is ongoing this week on international law and climate change, interdisciplinary perspectives. The floor is yours, Francesca. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the floor. It is a great pleasure and honor to take part in this event, which is jointly organized by two leading academic institutions that are both very dear to me. The Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna, where I currently work as assistant professor of international law, and the BIICL, where I used to work as a research fellow almost 10 years ago. So let me first express my gratitude to the organizers of this event, Christine Bakker, Roberto, Buizza, Jean-Pierre, Gauci, and Ivano Alogna, who invited me to say a few words on the connection between the workshop and the seasonal school on climate change and international law, interdisciplinary perspectives, that I have the pleasure of coordinating together with Christine. So to me, this workshop is definitely many things. It is an incredible opportunity for scientists and lawyers to have a constructive and fruitful dialogue and exchange on how science can play an increasingly important role in climate change litigation. It is also a welcome chance for our academic institutions to work together and to create new synergies. And it is also a substantial and integrated part of our seasonal school. As the rector of the Scuola Sant'Anna, Professor Sabina Nuti, has already mentioned, the present seasonal school is one of the many highly specializing training courses that the Scuola is currently offering to both undergraduate and postgraduate students. And my colleagues and I are all very eager to share our expertise with participants from different backgrounds and coming from various universities in Italy and abroad. And for us, these seasonal schools represent a unique opportunity to actually bring the teaching methodologies of the Scuola and also its interdisciplinary nature closer to the broader public, and to make it more accessible to everyone who has an interest in the subject and the research areas that we all pursue in our daily activities. And it is exactly with this spirit and this aim in mind that Christine and I have designed the program of the seasonal school, which started on Monday and is going to last until this Friday. The participants in the seasonal school are 15 master and PhD students belonging to different disciplines and coming also from different institutions. And over this intense week, we are relying on the valuable collaboration and support of several lecturers from the Scuola, from BIICL, and also from other institutions. Most of the lecturers, and I'm thinking, for example, of Professor Cristina Voigt, Professor Annalisa Savarese, Dr. Joanna Setzer, are actually involved also in the workshop, and they have kindly agreed to participate in both events, knowing that they are strongly interconnected. So the main goal that Christine and I tried to pursue while putting together this very ambitious program for the seasonal school was actually to showing the participants that international law alone is not capable to successfully and effectively address all the many challenges that climate change poses. And in light of this, we started off the seasonal school with a session on scientific concepts and issues and questions, and we have included in the program also sessions on ethical and philosophical issues, as well as on economic challenges. So this morning, Christine and I have already explained to our students which are the modalities through which they can actually interact and actively participate in the workshop this afternoon and tomorrow afternoon. And we are, of course, here the whole time to make sure that everything goes smoothly on our end, and also to reply to every question or curiosity that everyone might have on the seasonal schools at large, and this one in particular. But I don't want to take up much of your time, and I will just conclude my remarks by wishing all a successful and pleasant workshop, and I look very much forward to it. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Francesca, and great to hear what you've been doing with these students who are actually following live this event. So as you have already heard, the problem of climate change is global, is complex. There is COP26, who is co-organized by the UK, and Italy will be hosted in Glasgow by the UK. And also because of that, we have been working very closely with our colleagues in the UK. So with BIICL to organize this workshop, but I've been also involved with Rete Università per la Sostenibilità, RUS of Italy. And I have been working a lot in the past year with Alyssa and the COP26 network, UK network of universities. So I would like now to introduce Alistair Gilbert, who is the Director of Policy and Translation, the Grantham Institute for Climate Change at Imperial College, London, who is going to talk about this COP26 University Network of the UK. Alyssa, thank you very much for agreeing to talk at this conference. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Roberto. And it's really exciting to hear about this conference and be here at the start of it, which is obviously another cooperation between Italians and British experts. So I'm delighted to tell you a little bit more about what we've been doing together already. As Roberto highlighted, this is an important year. I was told by someone in the Cabinet Office team today who are running COP that it's 100 days till COP, apparently. That sounded a bit stressful to me, actually. I think the person who said it to me felt it was a bit stressful as well. So we know that the COP26 delivery team are really in action mode now to bring this to happen. But actually, Roberto and I have been speaking about this for maybe 2 years, about how we can cooperate in the anticipation of this Italian and UK co-leadership of the presidency of the international climate change negotiations. How can we make sure that the academic communities are pulling our weight and ensuring that really we're going to see a successful COP outcome? We know that there's a rich and deep and broad expertise on climate change related academic areas across Italy and the UK. And we want to make sure that that's really coming to bear on what happens at COP, but also we see COP as an opportunity to put some pressure perhaps on our respective governments in Italy and the UK to show how it's done as well, both in terms of delivering emissions reductions and delivering a more climate resilient world. So someone before me mentioned, I think Spyros mentioned the tube flooding, underground flooding just 2 days ago. So we're seeing impacts, as we speak. So these are really important. So just to tell you a little bit about the universities network, in anticipation of the UK and Italy having the presidency of COP, we started to gather together our colleagues across the academic space in the UK to try and make sure that we were delivering academic support both to the COP negotiations, but also wider messaging that aligned with delivering a net zero and resilient future. And we reached out to our Italian colleagues through RUS, the RUS network, to try and make sure that we did some activities together that also reached out within our academic communities and also to the wider world, sharing some of our academic expertise, but also listening to others in other parts of the world and trying to help others build this bridge between academic expertise and policy delivery on climate change. So in terms of some of the things that we've been doing, as a network, we're a group now of over 75 of the UK universities and 7 research organizations. We're very grassroots, and so we're made up of a really passionate group of researchers who are all doing different kinds of work on climate change, including economics, including law, but also the very natural sciences and engineering. So it's a really wide range of areas of expertise. And all of those people have lots of evidence that they want to share, lots of ideas with an evidence and peer-reviewed basis. But they also feel very passionate that because of this evidence, more needs to be done as urgently as possible. And so that's really galvanized the kind of things that we're doing. We've been engaging directly with the Cabinet Office teams and also with the Italian presidency teams to make sure that they know our expertise is available and helping to reach that expertise across the kind of wide network. We've also been publishing some key messages, so strategic briefing papers, just on about 10 topics that we think are really relevant to COP. But we've also been trying to get our own house in order and trying to make sure that universities are sharing best practice about how we can build net zero and resilience into what we're doing on our own campuses, because it's hard to deliver a message if you can't show that you can also walk the talk. Some of the things that we've delivered most successfully, though, together with Italian colleagues that I'd like to call out, is that we delivered a virtual conference on climate change in May this year called Climate Expo. And I will pop the link into the chat after I finish speaking, and hopefully that can be shared with all attendees. And that week was designed to talk about the latest climate change evidence, but as directly relevant to policymakers. And because we have this great collaboration with our Italian colleagues, we managed to have, I think, 5 or 6 ministers there, half from Italy and half from the UK, as well as policy engagement and a huge number of academics. We had over 5,500 people attend, but from all different sectors, to hear about the latest issues from green recovery through to climate finance. And all of that information is still available for anybody to use and download, including a fantastic climate and COP26 primer that tells you what COP26 is all about on the first day. So I'll pop that in the chat because you can see any of that information still now. And that was really a great collaboration between us and Italian colleagues, both defining the program, getting different academics from universities in both countries, as well as more globally to engage and provide presentation material there, and hopefully creating more collaboration going forward. Another couple of areas where we're doing some really good collaboration with our Italian colleagues is around youth engagement. Now, Italy is hosting the Youth COP, which is the pre-COP, and we've actually gathered together some links to students who are really eager to get involved across our universities. We're trying to connect those people to each other. There's a lot of student-led activity happening in both countries. But we also have launched at the Climate Expo a video that's youth-led called Act Now. And I know that our Italian colleagues have been really helpful in also getting different young people to promote what they feel and what they'd like to do about climate change in that video as well. And just finally, we've also managed to prompt a little bit of COP26 related new research. So we have a small number of funded research fellows that are part of our network, and our Italian colleagues have been helpful in supporting us choosing some of those experts, and also reached out where they know they have expertise in relevant areas. So great collaboration to be linked between the academic communities in our two countries, particularly with this goal in mind. And I hope that, we intend that our network, although it's called the COP26 Universities Network, it's really become a grassroots climate change academic experts network that we would intend to see have a life well beyond COP and help deliver on the outcomes and our collective climate change goals. And we would hope that in that vein, we would remain connected with our Italian colleagues most strongly. So with that, I wish you the best of collaboration and with your conference today, which is very focused on specific areas of academic expertise, obviously. And please do feel free to reach out if you want to know more about what we're doing in the network. So thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Alyssa. Before you disappear, can you maybe just spend 2 minutes explaining why this conference, which was a great success, and it was really impressive to see all the people attend, was called Climate Expo? Maybe just give a little bit of background of why that name and what we were really hoping. And then I will pass the floor to the next speaker. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, sure. So we called it Climate Expo because you haven't seen me put it in the chat yet. The O is actually a 0 at the end. So Climate Expo, the 0 is the net zero part of it. Obviously, we spoke about adaptation as well as mitigation and also finance. So it wasn't just mitigation, but I guess it was called that because we thought that was a little bit clever. But also we had intended, and this came originally, I think, from Cambridge. Well, I know it came originally from Cambridge University, who had always been planning to try and do some kind of virtual conference before COP, just to start to demonstrate to people that you can do things remotely. You don't have to do everything in person. Now, this was an intention well before the COVID pandemic that they were going to do such a conference. But what happened was, as we built up the network and it became significantly larger in the run up to our event, and as everyone became more used to doing things remotely, we went from the idea of having kind of a small little virtual conference to having a full week. And so, the idea was then to make it quite an expo, as in, exposition of all of the expertise that we have around the whole breadth of climate, but particularly to create an arc of conversation between this period of time that was sufficiently before COP, about 6 months before COP. So it was sufficiently a good time to provide new evidence. On the other hand, it gave enough time to have conversation where there were technical information that we could provide that was still relevant to the COP negotiations, where there's still discussions going on. So it was a chance to do things virtually and also globally. And we did get participation from, I think, about 144 countries, I think, in the end. So it also was a way to demonstrate that we really could engage people really broadly from around the world. And we very much hope that that model can be continued. And so we're going to try to see if the next presidency of COP would be interested in taking on a climate expo led by their own academic community before the conference that's held in 2022.
Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you very much for spending some time explaining the name. I do really hope that Climate Expo will be something that lead to the future COP and can provide a valuable insight and input to the COP discussions. So great. Thank you very much for your presentation. And so it's going to be me now. Well, I want to give you some introductory remarks about this workshop before then passing the floor to my colleague Christine and Ivano Alonia of BIICL. So firstly, welcome also from me and from all the organizations. We are very sorry that we cannot meet in presence here in Pisa. It's a fantastic weather. Hot, but not too hot today. So it's great. It would have been great to be all here, but unfortunately, we cannot do it. Now, this conference, the first thing that I want to say is that it's part of a series of events which have been organized and supported and promoted by the Ministry of Ecological Transition, the former Minister of Environment of Italy, Mr. Cingolani. So the Ministry of Ecological Transition has issued a call for activities under the banner All for Climate Italy 2021. These are activities that happen the months leading to COP26. We have been we applied, and our this workshop was selected as one of the activities which was going to be supported and promoted by the ministry. In fact, you can see us listed on the ministry website. This is also why the whole workshop today and tomorrow is live and open and free, because this was one of the conditions to be able to join this All for Climate activities. Now, the key feature of this workshop is to bring together experts from very different disciplines. The reason, you have already heard it from other speakers, is that the problem of climate change is complex, and to be able to address it, we really need to promote the share of knowledge, communication, and work together with different, and promote the working together of people with different expertise. In this case, is litigation and science. So the theme of the workshop is the role of science in climate litigation. Clearly, as you have probably heard, climate-related litigations are increasing in numbers, and more the experts in legal aspects are relying or would like to rely on scientists to be able to pass the most correct judges. And this is why we linked with BIICL to organize this workshop. BIICL is a leading international legal institute who has been working on issues linked to climate change. We at Sant'Anna have been promoting work on climate change, studying the impact of climate change, and we have been trying to promote this new interdisciplinary approach. Indeed, one of the results of the work that we have been doing with Scuola Superiore Normale of Pisa and the Istituto Studi Superiori of Pavia is a new PhD program, which is going to start in October this year. It's a new PhD program on sustainability and climate change. We had to receive funding from the Ministry of Environment for 105 scholarships. And the idea there is also to have people with different backgrounds working together. Talking about the role of science in climate change, let me make 3 comments. three main points. The first point I want to make is that science is essential to understand climate change. Okay, science can provide us, the judges, the legal expert, with a background knowledge of what has been happening in the past, what could happen in the future, what are most likely the causes of climate change, and what are the most likely future scenarios. As you see, I'm using a probabilistic language. I'm not talking about certainties. This is because there are uncertainties in the observations, and there are even more larger uncertainties in the future projections. But this is how it is. We will never know for certain what will the climate be in the future. Our knowledge will be based on projections. Projection will give us a probability that certain event will happen. With climate change, for example, extreme events will be more likely, more probable, probably more intense. But we need to learn how to use this type of information which is probabilistic in their essence. My second point is about science helping to attribute events or to attribute events to causes. For example, who is mainly responsible for the situation where we are? Who is mainly responsible for the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere? Or if we see an extreme event, I'm thinking about the extreme heat in Canada or the extreme heat that the USA is experiencing as we speak. Well, science can help us estimating, for example, whether these events can be attributed to climate change. So would this type of events have been possible in a climate, in the 1900 climate, in a climate where CO2 concentration was 300 parts per million or 320 parts per million? We are now at 420, a level that the Earth hasn't seen since 2.5 million years ago. And the third point I want to make is that science can help us identify the way forward. It can give us projections. You will hear some of my colleagues talking about this. So these are the three areas where science can help us: understanding climate change, attributing events, and identifying the way forward. Okay, let me conclude just saying that we need the complexity of climate change need experts with different backgrounds to talk and work together. And one of the reasons why we have organized this workshop is precisely that, to promote this type of exchange of information, to connect people with different backgrounds so that we can all work together to address the problems linked to climate change. Okay, so with this, I conclude my brief introduction, and I would like to give the floor to my colleague Christine Bakker, who is visiting scholar here at Scuola Sant'Anna and is a visiting fellow also at BIICL, and to Ivano Alonia, who is Arthur Watts Research Fellow in Environmental and Climate Change Law at BIICL. So Christine, first the floor is yours, and then Ivano. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. Can you hear me well like this? Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I'd just like to join you, Roberto, in welcoming both the speakers to this event who agreed to take part in the workshop, even though we had to decide to move it online and we are not able to invite you all to Pisa. But as Alyssa said before, probably it's even more reasonable to have this type of events online, especially when we're talking about climate change. So might actually be the way forward too, and maybe we can find some hybrid solutions too. But for the moment, we're here online. I'm very happy that you have all joined us. Thank you for that. And also, of course, a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us from wherever you are, and also the students in our seasonal school who are also connected and who will be also engaging in the discussion by asking their questions. So please, participants, do that and follow it and show that you're indeed engaging also here this afternoon. As previous speakers already mentioned, of course, the workshop follows up on earlier work we've been doing both at Sant'Anna, that Roberto mentioned, that we've been doing at BIICL, as Spyros mentioned, including the first BIICL workshop on climate change litigation, which we organized in January 2020, which led in turn then to the publication of the book, the edited volume on climate change litigation in global perspectives, which came out in April of this year, and to which actually several of the speakers of this conference have contributed. Another event that took place last week, organized by BIICL, also obviously followed up on these different earlier occasions, was the workshop on the separation of powers and climate change litigation. And in that context, also a workshop was focusing specifically on the role of science in climate change litigation. So again, there, some of the persons who participated in that workshop will be here today. So we always have this interconnection, of course, between these events, and we can, as it were, hopefully pursue the dialogue also through the different types of activities. Now, let me say just a few words about how the workshop is organized. As you know, it will span 2 afternoons, during which we will have 4 panels, bringing together some renowned experts in climate science, on the one hand, from universities and research centers in the UK and Italy, as well as legal scholars specializing in international environmental law and climate change litigation in the UK, but also in France, and we have a speaker from Singapore, so here too, and the United States as well. So we're spanning here the globe a little bit, but the main focus perhaps on the UK and Italy, as Roberto mentioned before. Now, the first panel, after our introductory remarks and after Ivano and Jean-Pierre will have, made some remarks as well, we will start with our first panel, which will focus on perspectives from climate science. And this panel will be chaired by Christina Voigt, who you probably all know, and who is a lawyer. So the word about that, we have indeed, in order to stimulate the interdisciplinary dialogue, we have also proposed to have a panel of scientists chaired by a lawyer and the other way around. So we hope that that may indeed be helpful also for the dialogue. In that first panel, indeed chaired by Christina Voigt, we will have contributions from Filippo Giorgi, Martin Siegert, and Miles Allen. Of course, in the program, you find all the details, and in each panel, the chair will obviously first introduce the speakers and their affiliations. So I will not take your time for that now. Just to give you an overview about the topics we're going to address. So the second panel later this afternoon, it will address perspectives from law and focus on cross-cutting issues. This will be chaired by Mario Martina, a scientist again, and there we will have insights from 3 lawyers, Joanna Setzer, Annalisa Savaresi, 4 lawyers actually. The last presentation will be given jointly by Jason Reeves and Deepa Sutherland. And tomorrow we have the 2 remaining panels, and then we'll go a little bit more into the details of practice of climate change litigation. First, focusing on the national experiences, climate change litigation before national courts, and focusing, of course, on the role of science, the role that science has played in these cases before national courts. That panel will be chaired by Sarah Mead, and the panel members will be indeed one from Singapore, Jolene Lin, Dennis Berkel from the Netherlands, and Daniel Metzger from the United States, Columbia University. The fourth panel to conclude will be chaired by Antonio Navarra, a scientist again, and the panel will look at the role of science in international environmental and climate change litigation, with contributions from lawyers, again, Sandrine Madjan-Dubois from France, Mark Withers, and Monica Feriatinta. Finally, we will have a concluding discussion. I hope this will work out as we had planned. The idea is then that the chairs of the 4 panels will come together again and bring in the insights from each of the separate panels into a common final discussions where we will have 2 lawyers and 2 scientists bringing in the insights from the previous discussions. And there again, of course, the public, students from the seasonal school, everyone can again participate and ask their questions. But so the idea is, please indeed, to the chairs, again, as anticipated, we would be appreciate it if you could try and bring 1 or 2 points from your panel discussions also into the concluding discussions at the end, which we will tomorrow at the end of the workshop, the end of the afternoon. And so indeed, throughout the 2 days, we hope there will be lots of opportunities for dialogue across the different disciplines, science and law, which I'm sure will be natural given the fact that our participants come from the different initiatives. Also, just a practical point, after presentations in each panel, there will be half an hour for discussion. So really hope to be able to address some of the questions also from the audience. And for each panel, each of the organizers will assist the chairs as a moderator. We will help you in selecting questions, including those from the seasonal school, of course. So with it, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you again for being with us. And I'd like to give the floor now to Ivano Alogna and Jean-Pierre to highlight some of the questions that may be considered during the discussions by way of setting the scene.
Yes, thank you very much, Christine. Yes, Jean-Pierre, sorry if I didn't mention your name yet, but the printout version of my program was an old one. So we are now moving more into the theme, and I'm very pleased to have Jean-Pierre Gauci from BIICL, Arthur Watts Senior Research Fellow in Public International Law, who will be followed by Ivano Alogna, Arthur Watts Research Fellow in Environmental and Climate Change Law, also BIICL, to tell you something about climate change litigation and science, setting the scene. So Jean-Pierre, first to you, and then Ivano to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. Actually, it's me that I will start. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you again to you and to Christine. And let me also thank Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies, of course, the Center for Climate Change Studies and Sustainable Actions, and my colleagues at the British Institute of International and Comparative Law for working together to convene this event. As we all know, we are now not on track to limit global warming to 2 degrees, and even less to pursue 1.5 degrees according to the Paris Agreement goal. On the contrary, as the latest UNEP emission gap report has alerted, we are far away from the goal to stabilizing the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and we are still heading for a temperature rise in excess of 3 degrees this century. The governments, of course, bear responsibility for this kind of climate crisis because they naturally bear the obligation to protect their citizens and to tackle this phenomenon through the tools at their disposal. Certainly, we can't forget also an important factor in this equation, the role of corporations, particularly fossil fuel industry, energy and cement companies. And of course, among these actors, we cannot avoid including ourselves, citizens and consumers, part of the causes of the current deregulation of our global climate, and therefore part of the problem. But what if we were also part of the solution? This is what we have discovered in the latest years, particularly in the last decades, when tired of just being the anthropos, the main responsible for creating a new geological epoch, according to some scientists, the Anthropocene, we have finally decided to take our fate in our hands. So the courts and tribunal are flooded with lawsuits, which seem to me more an exercise of active democracy than the mere act to cast a ballot once every few years and then just remain inert, waiting for the inevitable. Just last week, as Christine was saying, we discussed with more than 150 experts from different fields and from every continent about the role of the judiciary in meeting the climate crisis in an event that we called Our Future in the Balance. And if our future seems uncertain, the only way of putting the world on the right pathway is via a solid alliance between the science and the law. As we know, among the more than 1,800 climate litigation cases, according to the Sabin Center databases, the majority rely heavily on the findings and conclusion of the IPCC reports. And anyway, this consensus-based climate science is essential to all climate cases. Therefore, climate litigation as an important component of climate governance cannot be apprehended and understood other than in an interdisciplinary perspective, as Roberto was saying, as a dialogue between lawyers and scientists, providing respective tools and mutual support to contribute to the advancement of what at the end is necessarily a global governance. That's why we will discuss during these 2.5 days of scientific and legal perspectives, but also of comparative and international perspectives, or as we suggested in our recent edited volume, global perspectives. So if on one hand, courts are looking for some objective benchmarks or standards against which they can evaluate whether the action of governments and industry falls below a minimum level required to satisfy the legal obligation. On the other hand, we are confronted with a greater variability among legal systems, domestic and international courts, notwithstanding the great circulation of legal solutions around the world and the always more intense and desired dialogue among judges, evident in every workshop and international conference in which they participate. So this takes us to the necessity of balancing some sort of scientific objectivity with the great differentiation which constitute one of the principles of our global climate regime. In other words, to conjugate the importance of uniformization and the respect of diversity, keeping in mind, of course, that the current time constraints provoked by the already mentioned human capacity to create an emerging geological epoch in a few decades instead of million years. So we will see that through a set of normative, but also scientific related questions. And now I leave the floor to my colleague Jean-Pierre. Jean-Pierre, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ivana, and thank you, Christine and Roberto, for the introduction. It's always a pleasure to be working with colleagues, old and new, in these contexts, and to promote this interdisciplinary dialogue between both science and law, but also between different parts of the international law community. And it's particularly a pleasure for me to be around friends from the Institute, including some that I know are on the panel here, but also on other panels in the next couple of days, as well as in the audience and participating in the season of school. So it's a pleasure for me to be here. What I wanted to do at this stage is to ask a few questions that I hope we can answer in the next few hours today and then the afternoon tomorrow. And I think there's two key questions that come to mind when we talk about this relationship between scientists and the law, and when we're trying to have this interdisciplinary conversation. So the first one is, how can we, and I use we as a broad term here, as lawyers communicate what the law needs and the language of the law to a scientific audience? And on the other hand, how can we as scientists communicate the complexity of climate science in a way and in a language that is accessible to judges, lawyers, and those engaging in climate litigation? But beyond that kind of communication and dialogue, I think there's a series of other questions that I hope we can address over the next 2 afternoons. The first one is, what can we learn from other fields of law and science about the interconnection between law and science, and how science can inform litigation? Here I can think of a range of other areas of law, including tobacco, asbestos, medical claims, and others. What can we learn about how the law engages with science and scientists in those contexts that can be useful in the fight against climate change in the courts? What promising practices can we identify from those areas? What worked, what didn't work? What lessons can we learn to moving forward? Are there lessons that we can draw from how courts have addressed questions linked to the COVID-19 crisis? How information, analysis, scientific evidence relating to COVID-19 has been used by the courts, and how the evidentiary processes that the courts have used in that context. What are the differences between the use of science to inform policy and the use of science to inform litigation? Is there a difference? What is that difference? And how do we engage with that difference? What promising practices can we identify in different countries that can help ensure the best scientifically informed litigation is moving forward? We heard at the conference last week about courts in different countries, for example, appointing scientists to environmental courts. Is that the sort of promising practice we want to take forward? Are there others? What can we learn from different countries? And finally, what role can we as academics, researchers, play in bridging the divide, if indeed one exists, between the law and science in the field of climate change? So that's a lot of questions. I do not have the answers to these questions. So I will leave the answering to the much more qualified and much better qualified experts that will be speaking over the next 2 days. But with that, I will hand over back to Roberto. All I wanted to say in conclusion is thank you very much to Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna and to BIICL for putting this conference together. And I am very much looking forward to the conversations. Roberto, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre. Thank you, Ivano. So we have spent the last few months, Ivano, Jean-Pierre, Christine, and I, to talk about how best to organize this event. And it was clear from the beginning that what we really wanted was this mix of expertise being brought forward, and also try to enforce to force people to talk the language of the other community. This is why we have decided to have scientists chairing panels of lawyers and vice versa. Because we wanted the lawyers to think about how should we talk to the audience and to the chair of my session about issues which are linked to legal issues linked to climate change, and scientists, how can we talk science and explain what's happening to colleagues who have a very strong expertise in law and legal aspects, but might not be experts in science. Because communication, having the right form of communication is essential to make, to move forward. No, if we are not able to communicate among us experts in the field, you can imagine that it's even more complex to communicate to the public, to the politicians and the decision makers, and so being able to move issues forward and take the right decision. So this is why we have structured the workshop as we did. So with this, I want to conclude this first welcome session.